See, the good thing is, I know I did thousands of embarrassing things, but luckily I forget them. Now there must be one, come on, there must be one.
I have many, I have hundreds.
I've been reflecting on my most embarrassing moment because I have an absolute cornucopia of experience to draw on in this respect.
Well, there's been several actually. There was a time when my cravat got caught in the lift on the way to a new business presentation, but that's not actually true.
I was leading a sales conference with about 150 people in Las Vegas in a big hall with a big screen behind me. I'd prepared for weeks my presentation. I had it up on the screen facing the audience, and it was the early days of IM, and I had forgot to turn my IM off.
My very first meeting with my boss, I was a great rugby player. I wasn't a great player, but I was a great fan of rugby, and I'd lost my front tooth and I had a cap, and my tooth spat out as I was in my very first meeting with my new boss.
The IM came up and said, "Hello, darling," and I was facing so I didn't see it, but I heard a few laughs and didn't know what they were laughing at. And then another IM came up and said, "What are you doing?" And a few more laughs, and I still didn't know what was going on. And then finally the IM came up and said, "Stop ignoring me," and it was my wife.
No, my serious, most embarrassing one was at the very beginning of my propeller career. I was giving a new business presentation to some people in the property business in a very plush penthouse suite in Mayfair. And I was presenting to about 8 people, and about 2 minutes into my presentation I felt a little bit of moisture on my top lip, and I touched it with my finger hoping that maybe I'll get away with a runny nose. But I looked at my hand and it started dripping with blood, and I actually had a nosebleed in the middle of the presentation. And I looked at everyone, sort of hoping that somebody would perhaps give me a bit of assistance. They all stared blankly at me.
I was once to introduce a number of people to each other, and this was in Paris a couple of years back. In that meeting there was a French minister, and when I came to him I suddenly thought, wonder if he was the Minister of Culture, if it was somebody else. So I stopped my presentation around, we were only 5 people, and said, "I'm sorry, I simply cannot remember who you are." So he introduced himself as the Minister of Culture.
When I went out on my first presentation, selling classified recruitment on computing in 1982, the chap was looking to recruit a PC programmer, and I asked him what a PC was, which probably wasn't a wise question given I worked on computing magazine.
It was Robert Maxwell, a very, very scary and formidable fellow, and he was launching a newspaper called the London Daily News. He decided to take on the Evening Standard. At the time I was editing Media Week magazine, and I'd obviously written about this impending launch. And on the day of the launch, the 6 o'clock news invited me into their newsroom. They were doing a live piece in the London Daily newsroom as the first edition went to press. They had the editor, whose name I forget, the proprietor, Mr. Maxwell, and myself as the kind of neutral pundit. And being Captain Bob, he absolutely hogged the time. This was live news, so instead of giving a couple of sentences, he actually spoke on quite a long time about how successful this was going to be, what a marvellous idea London Daily News was, etc, etc, etc. BBC, of course, desperate to include a balanced comment in the item, so the guy turned to me, and the sort of producer was gesturing to me that I had 5 seconds to speak, and he said to me, "Tim Brooks, editor of Media Week, in one word, will this succeed or fail?" And I said, "Fail." And that was it, that was the end of the item.